Hello, welcome back to The Devil on the G-String. Oh man, Yuki, why? Why did you do this? After receiving a call from Usami, I head for the lab storage room one more time.
どうもご迷惑をおかけしまして。
Usami briefed me on the situation. Tokia Ida had apparently masterminded this operation and has now escaped somewhere. Though betrayed by her best friend, Usami managed to stay composed.
ユキを追いましょう。
Yeah.
あの状況で逃げるということは、ユキにはまだやり残したことがあるということです。
Usami's face tenses again.
水葉も心配です。
It's already 2 a.m. The director has gone home for now to rethink the situation, and Eiichi ended up deciding to escort Miss Noriko home. That leaves no one but Usami and I, and a handful of bored Yakuza. Alright, let's pull out all the stops and track down Tokido. A tall, beautiful girl walking around in uniform at this hour shouldn't be too hard for the Soniyama guys.
すみませんね、いつも。
You should be. If I keep on using men for matters that are none of the Soniyama group's business, they'll have me cutting my fingers off an apology before too long. Usami laughed feebly.
関係なくもないと思うんですよ。
Pardon?
この上んなやり口、人をもてあそぶような犯罪、誰かの入れ知恵とは思いませんか？
Oh, please. Not Mao again.
私の考えすぎですかね。そうですよね。ユキが魔王とつながってただなんて、そんなはずないですよね。
I couldn't say anything.
ユキのお父さんは時田明宏さんと言いまして、そりゃ立派な方なんですよ。警察の警視正っていうものすごく偉い人なんですよ。だからユキもそんなお父さんの恩をあだで返すような真似はしないはずなんです。そうです。そりゃ白鳥理事長には恨みもあるでしょう。でも脅迫して復讐するなんておかしいじゃないですか。ユキは時田警視正の下で立派に育ったんです。今のお父さんでよかったと自慢げに言っていたこともあります。
Usami seemed unable to hold back her frantic emotions.
こんなネクラなことしなくてもいいじゃないですか。なんでまたこんな。ユキならもっと考えて、そう、もっとうまく理事長を見返してやれるはずなんです。
Her voice gradually fell out as she trembled, and her hands began to shake.
おかしいですよ。あれはユキじゃない。
Usami is looking for a source of evil. She simply can't accept the fact that the Tokita she knew could undergo such a metamorphosis without some dark catalyst. Then again, the belief in evil is sometimes one's only hope of salvation. Usami. Was it on a whim that I rested my hands on Usami's shoulders? She didn't shake me off. Instead, she silently accepted my kindness. Though she's usually so annoying, so downright disgusting, the Usami I lent my support to seemed small enough to fit in my hand. After a brief intermission, time continued its course. The night wore on as the frigid, unforgiving wind beat endlessly against the window. Stealing through streets and alleys bathed by neon lights, Tokita Yuki brainstormed for a new countermeasure. If everything had gone according to plan, she'd be heading for the cheap apartment where Hashimoto and Mizuha awaited her, a large amount of money in hand. Yet will her bad luck ever cease? She's near the apartment, but Hashimoto isn't answering her calls. Was there some accident? In any case, entering the apartment would have been dangerous. Yuki slipped into the darkness, sliding up against the walls of nearby buildings. Her school uniform was simply too conspicuous. Should I rely on the Mao? Now that Yuki understood how easy it was to incite the wrath of one of the city's most powerful organizations, she began to realize the true extent of the meticulous nature she had once sensed in Mao. The man has been able to avoid the omnipresent threat of the Soniyama group for months now, despite moving freely about the city. Surely that means Mao would be able to guarantee her safety. Only I'm not the Mao's henchman. Mao had merely advised her a bit concerning this plan. He had also supplied the drugs to ensure Mizuha slept through her transportation to the apartment. Now that she objectively evaluates the situation, she may indeed have been possessed by the devil. It all began 2 years ago, with a single email. The sender identified himself as Mao. He had quite thoroughly investigated Yuki for being no more than a common stalker. He knew that she was no illegitimate child, and that her mother had passed away. Mao, who had put forth an investigation into her past that would spark envy in even the best private detective, had begun to entice Yuki. After a few electronic exchanges, Yuki left her hometown alone to Embezzled City, running to meet this most intriguing Mao. The club was deep in the depths of Central Boulevard. After introducing herself at the entrance, she was ushered into a VIP room. It bore the look of a high roller's lounge in an upscale casino. No light poured from the ceiling. Her only option in the dim room was to rely on the indirect light at her feet. Nevertheless, the most defining point was the mask on each and every one of the employees' and guests' faces. Among them were narrow-eye masks, the kind you would expect to be worn by sexual deviants, often accompanied by decadent or innate Satan hoods. Some of the group even sported a pair of red horns, along with the likenesses of such other such horns only imaginable in medieval European paintings.
私が魔王だ。わざわざ田舎から飛行機で来てもらってすまなかったな。
This Mao was no exception. He wore a white masquerade mask reminiscent of the Phantom of the Opera. Yuki tried to ignore the oddity.
お招きありがとう。随分と素敵な場所ね。
気に入ってもらえたかな。ここではどんな地位の人間も子供になって遊ぶことができ
Yuki
る。
is working with Mao. The coquettish voices of both women and men echoed from the dark corners of the room. They were accompanied by the sounds of alcohol sliding down throats, of shouts demanding service from nearby women. The guests endlessly entertained themselves with such vulgar acts.
私に何の用？つまらない用事だったら警察に駆け込ませてもらうけれど。
A deep laugh spilled from behind the mask.
あちらにいらっしゃる御人がわかるか。
Mao gestured with his chin, and Yuki's eyes followed. A plump, middle-aged man sat there, slumped on a sofa, wearing nothing but an oversized diaper on the lower half of his body. Standing beside him was a woman in an apron shaking a toy at him, as if soothing her upset infant. The scene's inhuman, bizarre nature caused Yuki to
あち
reflexively
らは
avert her eyes.
警視庁の去る天井人だ。夜は素敵なプレイに興じられているようだが、朝になれば正義の警察官として私のような犯罪者を追い詰める。面白いだろう。
Yuki calmed her breath in an attempt to regain her composure. Despite her efforts, the otherworldly aura of the room negated any sense of order within her. Mao had not even laid a finger on the mountain of money before.
警察や暴力団への根回しなしでこんな店が日本で営業できるはずがないだろう。お父上に恥をかかせるような真似はよすんだ。
よく知っているわね。私の父が警察官だって。
まあ、だからこそお前に声をかけた。
Yuki finally regained her composure and attempted to scrutinize the Mao's gestures and tone of voice. Her possible routes to greeting this man were limited as long as his face was hidden from her.
聞けば、時田は長年犯罪心理学を勉強しているとか。
探偵でも雇ったのかしら。
Mao nodded.
保護観察所に演者を装って何度も通ったそうじゃないか。なかなか楽しい子供だったようだな。
ありがとう。おかげで変な目で見られたけれど、今では友達もたくさんできたわ。
With a slight smile, Yuki examined Mao. He'd recrossed his legs twice since she entered the room. His hands fidgeted in tune with the conversation, opening and shutting as he makes his comments. He was an archetypal diplomatic type. That was the conclusion of Yuki's evaluation. People who fall under this category make judgments through the use of logic and reason. Yuki engraves each and every one of his fingers' subtle emotions, their expressions, into her memory. He seems to be quite the careful man. Whether that care was manifested as a result of prudence or paranoia was
いろんな犯罪者と会ってどう思った？
どうもこうもみんないい人ばかりだったわ。私とよく遊んでくれたもの。
彼らも寂しかったんだろう。娘ができた気持ちだったのでは？
そうね。
Yuki made sure to keep the conversation going without letting her guard slip. Mao had kept the command of the conversation from the beginning. The man before her, without saying a word about himself, had been trying to invade Yuki's
ところで、あなたはどうして魔王なの？
悪の権化として分かりやすくていいだろう。 そういう時だわ。なぜカタカナでユキという名前なんだ？
He's good. He smoothly evades the question and follows up with a question of his own. Judging by his mastery over conversation, he was likely a businessman of
名
some
前
kind.
の由来は私も知らないわ。お役所に届けるときにうっかりしちゃったんじゃない？
Yuki decided to switch strategies. It's futile to bear a barrage the diplomatic businessman type with questions. This type likes to talk. One should build trust with these people by honestly answering the questions they pose. Only after this trust has been solidified will they begin to speak about themselves. Mao recrossed his legs again.
かわいそうだな。子供は自分の名前を選ぶことができない。実の父を恨んだことは？
それは何度も。
母の葬儀にも来なかったそうじゃないか。
ええ。あの夜はどうやって思い知らせてやろうかと、それだけを考えていたわ。
それを今実行に移そうとは思わないか？
Yuki laughed as if she understood.
クロージングをかけるには早すぎると思わない？
Mao laughed along.
これは失礼。時田に復讐を実行させることが私の目的ではないのだが、そう聞こえたのならすまなかった。
He spread open his arms as if to embrace his own joke, then recrossed his legs. Yuki pondered this gesture as she smiled with the Mao. She came to the realization that he recrosses his legs just before redirecting the conversation. Does this reaction mean something? Recrossing one's legs is often used as a way of relieving tension. In short, it could mean he's
じゃあ
lying.
本当の目的をそろそろ教えてもらえる？
時田と遊びたかった。それじゃダメか？
こんな場所で遊ぶ趣味はないわ。
わかった。本当のことを言おう。目の前に何がある？
お金ね。何億あるのかしら。
実はあることをしてもらいたいんだ。報酬は弾む。
聞くだけ聞いてみましょう。
簡単なことだ。
Mao said as he recrossed his
銀行
legs.
口座を一つ作ってほしい。そしていずこかから振り込まれた金を私に渡してくれ。受け渡しはこの部屋だ。
Yuki rejected the request with strength and confidence.
嘘はやめて。
Mao seemed to be at a loss for words.
銀行口座？なぜ私なの？あなたは私の家庭環境から能力まで細かく調べて、結局はそんな誰にでもできるような仕事を任せようっていうの？
何事も信頼関係というものがある。まずは小さな仕事からお願いしたいと思っても不思議はないだろう。
いいえ。あなたは嘘をついているわ。
She stared at Mao's legs with a sharp look. One of his long, fidgety legs was about to be placed on the other. Mao nodded and said, utterly
面
composed.
白いな。
Mao's hands and legs stopped moving. A question, asked almost in humor, escaped his lips.
そうやって人の心を探らねば不安か？
As he spoke, he put his fingertips together and sank deeply into the sofa. Yuki, astonished, felt a panic rise inside of her. Mao's entire persona had changed just a moment ago. Putting one's fingertips together denotes a feeling of grandeur and dignity. The man before her was aware of this fact and was consciously acting in that
ちょこ
manner.
まかと手足を動かしていたのはわざとね。
どうかな？
Now he had resorted to playing with the fringe, which jutted from the side of his mask. That would typically be read as a sign of anxiety or a lack of confidence, but there was no conceivable reason for Mao to be anxious.
なんなのよ。
An irritated tone slipped from her tongue. Mao seemed to perceive that as an opening, and quickly leaned forward, close enough to violate Yuki's personal space. Just as she realized she had gotten in over her head, Mao's powerful voice pressed her.
私の仲間になれ。時田ユキ。
The end of his sentence struck home.
そうすればその類まれな好奇心を満たしてやろ
好奇心ですって？
う。ごまかすな時田。罪を感じているのだろう。
Even his mask seemed to smirk.
現にお前がこれまで会ってきた犯罪者は模範囚の善人ばかりではないか。
だったら何なの？
Yuki felt that she would have been overwhelmed by his force if she had not at least feigned defiance.
そうよ。私が見てきたのはケーキも半ばで仮出所してきた人たちがほとんど。 根がいい人なのは当たり前。でもそれが何か悪いの？
The powerful feelings Yuki held leaked into her words. The pressure in that long quarantine zone of her heart squeezed them out into the open air. Of course, there was something wrong. It was a sin to treat people who had been repenting for so long and who had been forgiven by the society they offended as mere objects of study or curiosity. However, the torment Yuki felt because of her guilt had always been washed away by the whisperings of her inner demons. She was only a child, after all, not to mention her complicated background, which had destroyed her ability to trust other human beings. The opening in her heart was not lost on the king of these demons, Mao.
何も悪くない。何も悪くはないが、もったいないとは思う。
もったいない？
世の中にはもっとおかしな人間がいる。欲望に歯止めの効かなくなった真の凶悪犯や、嘘を真実と信じたまま話すことができる社会病失者。目的のためなら手段を選ばぬテロリスト。
Yuki's heart began to race against her will.
時田はいずれ父に倣って警察官を志すのだろう。ネゴシエーターの必要性は近年になって日本でもようやく認められてきた。お前はその卵だ。今から実地訓練をしておいて損はなかろう。
つまり何なの？
The more Yuki spoke, the less she was able to contain
あな
herself.
たのお仲間になれば、今まで私が見たこともないような変人を紹介してくれるっていうの？
The mask nodded deeply.
いくらでも。
そんな嘘でしょ？
嘘かどうか確かめたくはないか。
Yuki hesitated once more. As she sat speechless, Mao said,
これからここである外国人と会うことになっているのだが、一緒にどうだ？
外国人？
ああ、鼻毛を切らない習慣があるが気のいい男だ。
でも犯罪者なのでしょ？
ただの商人さ。
あなたは犯罪者って名乗ったわよね。犯罪の密談を警察官の娘が黙って見過ごすと思う？
そう構えるな。酒を酌み交わすだけだ。そしてこの金の一部を渡す。
皇帝でも買ったの？
余裕が出てきたな。乗り気になってきたと思っていいのかな。
Mao sank into the sofa again. Yuki's heart began to sound the alarm. Her curiosity became unmanageable and began to claw at the walls of
お
its
前
quarantine.
は何も知らなくていい。
Mao kindly said,
私が何者でどんな商売をしていて何を企んでいるのか、犯罪につながるようなことを一切知らずにただ貴重な体験ができる。
However, associating with Mao would nonetheless be approving of crime. That is a line she must not cross.
どうかな。悪い話ではないと思うが。
Yuki was perplexed. Or rather, she was feigning
訪問
perfection.
販売なんかでは玄関のドアを開けさせたらもう勝ったも同然らしいわね。
押し売りをする気はないがな。
Her fate may have been decided as soon as she met Mao. From the very onset, she had been successfully coerced into deceiving her father by coming here without telling him. She hadn't actually lied, but she had certainly been less than forthcoming. It's no wonder that she'll continue to do so.
それで魔王を
She couldn't go on without asking the most critical question.
親切に私の好奇心を満たしてくれるのはいいけれど、見返りに何を求めてるの？私の父に関わるようなことだったらお断りよ。
She mustn't cause her father trouble, as Mao is a criminal. As such, he may desire to blackmail or somehow manipulate her father, a powerful figure in the police system. Yuki steeled her courage as she gazed into the evil mask's eyes. And Mao, from the other side of the mask, responded in the slow manner of a parent speaking to an infant.
特に見返りを求めているわけではないが、強いて言えば
Mao put his hands to the mask.
魂かな。
His tone held no hint of cajolery. The contract was signed. Now that he had shown his true face, there would be no escape from this Mao. After that day, about once a month, Yuki would secretly meet with Mao. He typically introduced her to his acquaintances to Menbetsu City, but oddly enough, his meetings also often took her to the coast of the sea in Japan, Fukui, and a small village in Niigata. Yuki was able to meet a great many people during these rendezvous. Check-ins who ruled the Moscow black market, extremist Muslim jihadists. Mao often received briefcases from fishermen at the wharf, but he never explained what they held. Yuki never intended to ask. What? Most of the Japanese people she met were youngsters. They were each the child of a politician, or of the owner of a large corporation, or some other powerful person. And they were each children who, for some reason or another, had become unable to live their lives without running away from something. Each and every one of them had carried a sickness in their heart. To Yuki, these meetings were exceptional in a way. Speaking to a criminally minded child outside the bounds of a youth detention center is a rare opportunity. Yuki had the opportunity to meet an abundance of strange, abnormal people. She pitied them, sympathized with them, empathized with them, and grew from her experiences. It didn't take long until she herself lost the ability to control her desire. The desire to sate her endless curiosity. However, the Mao she had met with so many times now remained a complete mystery. His vast wealth and unquestionable connections reflected the title Mao perfectly, but Yuki had never once seen the man commit a crime. That said, she still wasn't about to let her guard down around him.
まさか春が追っていた人間こそが魔王だった。
Even at the school they attended together in her hometown, Yuki knew that Haru was searching for someone with some objective in mind. But no matter how close they grew, Haru would never tell Yuki about the Mao. She had only found out a few days ago when she interrogated the man who seemed to be one of Mao's pawns, Saijo. Yuki knew Mao's contact details, though he likely had many more and had met with him in person several times. Should she tell Haru about these things? Yuki hesitated on this for a time. As she hesitated, Mao planted the seeds of the plan for that night's hostage situation. In the beginning, Yuki had no intentions of harming others in her quest for vengeance against the director. She hadn't intended on revealing Hashimoto's identity or dragging Miss Noriko into the fray. Her original plan was to persuade Mizuha to join her, fake a hostage crisis, and make the director squirm a little. Why did it have to turn out like this? The answer lied in Yuki's own weakness. She didn't have the courage to tell her father, a police officer, that she was involved with the man who had triggered the car bombing in the Southern District. She didn't have the courage to tell Haru either, for fear of being hated. Besides, her weakness was responsible for her desire for vengeance in the first place. What would Yuki gain by threatening and stealing from the director?
気が済むではないか。
Mao said these words. Is it really alright to just bottle up your feelings? He spurred her on.
理事長という最も制裁を受けるべき相手を放置したまま優秀な警察官になれるとでも
Of course, she had said her words to the director. She had scolded him as much as she could for abandoning her mother and then having the audacity to simply skip her funeral. But the director merely gave her an empty apology.
なぜ理事長が反省しないのか。それは時田に力がないからだ。
The power Mao spoke of is one molded around a skeleton.
あまりこういう大きな例えは好きではないが、この世界を見てみろ。軍事力の最も大きい国が最も大きな発言力を持っている。力のない人間がどれだけ素晴らしいことを言ったところで、一部の美談好きの人間しか耳を貸さない。結局は凶弾に倒れたり、多数派の迫害を受けることになる。
Every great negotiator needs a great assault team behind him.
私は子供が大好きでな。時田のような優秀な子供が話せばわかる時代を作り上げてくれると信じているが、今はまだ早すぎる。まだまだ数と金と握り拳がものを言う。
Yuki submitted to the devil's temptation. Then again, who could be subjected to 2 years with the Mao and come out uncorrupted? Mao was always composed and captivating, but most of all, he possessed the power to capture the hearts of the young. And as a result, Yuki betrayed Haru, hurt Mizuha, and is now being chased by the Yakuza. You reap what you sow. A shadow stepped into the darkness.
あら、水葉。
Mizuha stood there, astonished.
話は全部橋本くんから聞いたわ。
へえ。
He seemed brutish enough to get the job done, but he must be soft on women.
私を縛ってたロープ緩んでたから隙をついて彼のナイフを奪ったの。
すごいわね。そんな度胸があるなんて知らなかったわ。その勇気の一部でも京介くんに向けられたらよかったのにね。
姉さん本当なの？
何が？
本当に姉さんが学園で事件を起こしたの？ 私の父を脅迫したの？
本当よ。
Yuki answered point blank.
そうしないと気が済まなかったの。
それで気は済んだ？
Yuki shook her head ambiguously.
何その手。
困ってるんでしょ？
助けてくれるっていうの？
Yuki smiled faintly as she looked into Mizuha's eyes. They weren't the eyes of
自首
fire.
する気はないんでしょ？
Of course not. If she had even considered it, she wouldn't have shoved Haru to the ground and run away. In fact, the biggest reason for not wanting to get the police involved from the very start was because she didn't want her father to learn of this.
まだやり残したことがあるからね。
The black flames in Yuki's heart ignited once again. She had left the suitcase with the money in the lab equipment storage room. Thus, even after all that effort and labor, Yuki had gained nothing. I need to show him once more.
まだ続けるのね。
Mizuha's voice betrayed her attempts to hide her sadness from Yuki.
水葉、どうして私が今まであなたに会いに来なかったかわかる？
Of course she doesn't. There's no way she could. The only person who could understand her mother's sadness and suffering was Yuki.
なぜ私の方からあなたたちに会いに行かなければならないの？頭を下げるのはあなた方でしょ？まあ分かってるわ。水葉は悪くないもの。それでも水葉に会いに行くことは母さんを裏切るようで気が引けたの。
私も姉さんに会いたかった。でもどこに住んでるのか知らなくて。
分かってるわよ。分かってる。そうね。水葉は何も悪くないわ。
Mizuha had merely been brought up in naive ignorance and harmony, unlike Yuki.
さあ、おしゃべりはここまでにしましょう。
As Yuki turned to walk once more into the darkness, Mizuha called to her, her hand still
姉さんは
outstretched.
私を恨んでるの？
まさか
Yuki said as she donned her usual gentle
あな
smile.
たは大事な妹よ。
The negotiator lied. Supposedly Tokido was spotted around here. Time continued to march on deeper into the night as Usami and I continued our search along Central Boulevard.
先ほどちらりと聞こえましたが、ユキの他にもう一人いたとか。
Yeah, probably Hashimoto.
ということは、水葉は解放されたんでしょうか？
No, wait. They said it was a girl.
つまり
Meaning it was probably Shiratori, I guess. They must have run off together. Usami sighed.
おそらくユキはもう一度理事長を脅迫する気でしょう。
It's quite possible. She never did manage to get the money earlier.
自分は理事長のお宅にお伺いするとします。ユキから電話が入るでしょうから。
Alright, I'll keep looking for Tokido. We parted ways. Panting, Yuki and Mizuha fled through the black darkness of the
京介
wharf.
君は怖いわね。
After that, the pursuers showed up. One of them called out to Yuki. He even managed to grab her arm before she shook him away and took off. She took 2 different taxis in an attempt to shake them, but it was to no avail. Taxis stop at red lights, but Yakuza don't follow the rules of the road. They follow their targets to the target
Nessa.
their search.
どうするの？
A nearly inhuman cacophony of angry snarls rushed in from the distance. It was only a matter of time before they were found.
私に考えがあるわ。だからここまで逃げてきたの。
Yuki pulled Mizuha by the hand and headed for a nearby warehouse. The heavy steel door was locked. However, Yuki had met with Mao once inside this warehouse. The entrance had a keypad, and Yuki had memorized the password Mao inputted. The warehouse's interior was dark and musty. Yuki pulled shut and locked the
こん
door
な
before
ところ
turning
で
to face Mizuha.
何をしようっていうの？
But locked the door before turning to face Mizuha. Mizuha's doubt was natural, even in the face of
協
Mizuha's
力してくれるんでしょ、水葉。
Yuki untied a rope. Yeah, okay. Mizuha's eyes
これは芝居よ、水葉。
Oops. Yuki pulled her dumbfounded sister toward her and tied Mizuha's arms behind her back. Mizuha's resistance to being bound amounted to no more than a quiet moan.
いい顔ね。そのままでいて。写真を撮るから。
Yuki pointed her cell phone's camera at her tied up sister and pressed the button.
姉さん、説明して。
Okay. I'll read that. So it said, let me see. Yuki untied a rope that bound a stack of crates. Yeah. Okay. Yuki almost wanted to say, think for yourself. Shouldn't Mizuha know exactly what's about to go down by
あ
now?
なたを人質に、理事長に死んでもらうの。
Yuki flatly declared her intention to kill Mizuha's own father.
私には覚悟が足りなかったのよ。たった500万くらいで許してあげようだなんて甘かった。だから春に見破られたんだわ。
The ecstasy and the madness in Yuki's face reflected in her sister's eyes.
姉さん、本気？
あなたの父親が私と母さんを家から追い出した時、なんて言ったか知ってる？知らないわよね。
Go die in the cold. Yuki remembered it clearly. In the cold, under the falling snow, they had been thrown out with no more than the clothes on their backs. Mizuha may be trembling and fear now, but her pain is nothing compared to the freezing air and the uncertainty of
や
that
め
day.
よう、姉さん。そんなことしたら、姉さんだって。
少しは私の役に立ってよ、水。
Yuki's stifled voice held plenty enough force to silence
姉
Mizuha.
妹でしょ。
They weren't very similar sisters. Their outward appearances were barely alike, but their personalities were completely opposite. Mizuha's face was puffy and round, proof of her comfortable upbringing. She had a mushy way of putting her foot in her mouth every time she talked to the boy she liked. Her calmness finally grinded on Yuki's nerves. She gazed at Mizuha's neck. Her younger sister had kept Yuki's ancient memento dearly all these long years.
私、寒かったのよ。そのマフラーすら返してほし
You
い
can
っ
put
て
your
思う
foot
く
in
ら
your
い。
mouth, she retorted. You have to be pretty flexible for that. Mizuha was speechless when she realized that her sister's eyes bore no hesitation and had nothing more to say. Yuki transmitted the photograph she had just taken. Let the second round begin, Haru. Whoa. This is some twist. A winter wonderland waiting just beyond an oak and beach-lined promenade. This hill in the eastern district of Tomenbetsu City was Mizuha's favorite spot to play.
この子になんて名前つける？
They had spent 2 hours making a child-sized snowman.
水葉が名前つけなさいよ。あなたがほとんど作ったんだから。お姉ちゃんにつけてほしいの。
Mizuha always copped a bratty attitude around her parents, but today, with Yuki, she
じゃあ、
worked her smile. Yuki began with
ゆき
crossed
太郎
arms.
は？ゆき太郎か。かわいいな。やっぱり違うのがいい。何にするの？水葉の好きな男の子の名前にしたい。そんなのやだよ。恥ずかしいよ。
The cold, fluffy snow piled up on the sisters' shoulders. Snowflakes landed on the tips of their toes, gradually melting into the warmth of their shoes. Perhaps not unlike the endlessly dancing white weather, Mizuha's laughter refused to subside. This was an old, happy memory. They had played with all their hearts until nightfall. They didn't want to go home. They didn't want to leave the sense of unity for their typically divided family. What awaited them was a strange household with 2 mothers. Yuki never bothered to consider how her parents and Mizuha's had come to live together until much later. Nevertheless, it seemed Yuki's mother was important to the Shiratori household. Even in her earliest memories, Yuki remembers her mother doling out orders as her father's personal
水葉
assistant.
ね。お姉ちゃんと結婚するんだ。
Her sister's sweet voice made its way to Yuki's ears. It was an unforgettably stirring sensation.
法律でね、姉妹は結婚できないんだって。でも、水葉とお姉ちゃんは違くて、とにかく結婚できるんだよ。そうね。 私が男だったらよかったわね。
She was an adorable little sister. The snowflakes caught in her eyelashes glittered like teardrops framing her innocent
姉
smile.
ちゃん、水葉のこと好き？ええ、もちろん。水葉も大好き。
Mizuha shuffled her feet about and then gathered up the display snow in her hands. Mizuha smiled mischievously as she packed a
ちょっ
tiny
と
snowball.
まさか私にぶつけようっていうの？そんなことしないよ。これは雪太郎のご飯だよ。ご飯って。
Mizuha was a sweet little girl. Her diligent preparation of a snowman's meal was no less than dazzling to her cool, mature older
ねえね
sister.
え、おむすびの中に何入れたらいい？やっぱり梅干しかな。梅干しなんてないでしょ。じゃあ何入れる？言葉を込めてあげなさい。言葉？そう。言葉はとっても強いの。強いの？剣は剣よりも強しっていうくらいだから絶対よ。千の中剣よりも3つの敵意ある新聞の方が怖いとも言うし。お姉ちゃんは物知りだからな。
Mizuha's tiny head nodded over and over. Yuki dearly loved her little puppy of a
梅干し
sister.
を入れてもしばらくしたらなくなっちゃうでしょ。うん。梅干しも死んじゃう。でも言葉は決してなくならないわ。私たちが覚えている限り。おお、そっかー。たとえ雪太郎が溶けちゃっても私たちが残した言葉は永遠になくならないでしょ。なるほど。言葉ってとっても強いんだね。水葉も何かあったらまず話すのよ。どれだけ怖い人でも話せば分かってくれるから。パパとママも？
Yuki smirked at that. Yuki was still young and innocent. She had yet to understand the critical role of violence falling in the shadows of words.
もちろんよ。さあ、雪太郎にご飯をあげましょう。うん。もう言葉は決まってるんだ。何？教えて。
Her little sister cheerfully answered.
水葉はいつでも姉さんの味方だよって。
Yuki couldn't help but crack a smile.
ちょっとちょっと、そんな言葉を雪だるまに食べさせないでよ。
Their laughter diffused into the winter sky. The sun gradually sank behind the horizon, dimming the earth, but the sisters' radiance was not so easily arrested. Not the slightest hint of their coming parting was present in those dazzling winter days. It was 3 o'clock in the morning. The men who had been chasing Tokita reported in, and she had apparently last been seen with Shiratori near the docks in the western district. The sounds of the night and the waves crashing against the wharf were interrupted by the ringing of my cell phone.
浅井さん、今どちらです？
At the harbor.
なるほど。ユキはおそらくどこかの倉庫の中にいます。
Why do you think that?
つい先ほど私の携帯に画像付きでメールが届きました。
What was the picture?
水葉です。手を後ろに縛られていました。
Now even her sister's gone and taken her hostage. Well, was there a caption or anything?
理事長を連れて今浅井さんがいる倉庫付近まで来いと。
And what if we don't?
お分かりでしょう。
She'll kill Shiratori.
とにかく急いでそちらに伺います。理事長も写真を見て承知してくださいました。
Alright, in the meantime, we'll look for the warehouse Tokita is in and get a perimeter set up. What is Tokita planning? She's not really going to kill Shiratori, is she? Is she doing all this just to get back at the director?
いっぱい集まってきたみたいね。
Dozens of rushing footsteps beat at the ground outside the warehouse. Leaked out from the inside, so it was likely quite easy to locate Yuki and Mizuha once the port's main storage buildings. A few short moments later, men were already kicking at the door and shouting. Burp. Hiccup. Burp. Her warehouse's iron door held fast and strong. They were nothing but a gang of hoodlums. Unlike the police, they didn't have the tools necessary to force their way to
どうするの？
何？
frustrating.
逃げられないわよ。
そうかしらね。
This is right on my reading speed, trying to keep up. She says she shrugged her shoulders rebelliously.
どうやって？
正面から堂々とよ。
そんなことが。
できるのよ。言葉は力だって教えたでしょ。
Mizuha bit her lip after realizing her sister's intentions. Yuki idly looked down at her as she considered her options for the coming negotiation. It would be simple. Her opponents were a gaggle of amateurs. The director would be too worried about his precious reputation to call the police. Even considering Haru's raw logic, Yuki still had her nemesis pested soundly when it came to persuasive skill. The only problem would be her final bastion of innocence. Once Yuki commits the crime herself, she has turned down a dark path in which there is no return. Her father's golden record would be forever tarnished if his daughter became a criminal. It is for this reason that Yuki apologized to her father, Tokita Akihiro, in her heart. She desperately wished she could have at least said a word of pardon to him, but the march of time would prove
姉
itself
さんお願い。
necessary.
考え直して。
Mizuha spoke directly to the hesitation in Yuki's heart. However, her pleading, psychopathic expression only reminded Yuki of her filthy biological father, and the hatred within her burned away what barriers held her resolve in check.
サイは投げられたのよ。水は。
Around an hour later, Usami showed up with the director in tow. The sea breeze swept up her long hair and tousled it about. That one there, Usami. See the faint light coming from the window?
間違いなさそうですね。どうやって入ったんでしょうか。
Usami's question was right on the mark, but I didn't have an answer.
一体今度は何だっていうのかね。
The director flared up at me despite his exhausted appearance.
真犯人はユキだって？あの娘の母親はうちの会社の金を横領したんだぞ。本来なら警察に突き出してやるところを追放するだけで許してやったんだ。
She should be thanking me, not holding some grudge, he says with a sigh.
まったく犯罪者の娘も犯罪者か。
The director was lucky we have such a strong wind this morning. The eyes peeking at him from behind Usami's long, wind-set bangs bore all the horror of his eye gonzos. I interrupted his whining. That's great, director. You didn't even get the police involved when you were the victim of the embezzlement. That probably means you want to keep this little case under wraps too, right?
ああ、君だってそうだろう。
Oh, I couldn't agree more. If we keep the events of this awful night a secret, even Tokyo might have a future. Not that Tokyo's future is of any importance to me. It'd just be a waste of an able mind. I mean, if I build my connections with her now, she'll be of use to me in the future.
ユキに連絡します。
Yeah. Oh, use that device you used before so I can hear it too. Usami quickly took out her phone and began to fit it with the widget. The phone rang.
遅かったわね、ハル。
ユキ、そこにいるんだな。
ええ。今度こそちゃんと倉庫の中にいるわ。小細工はなしよ、ハル。理事長は連れてきたんでしょうね。
The man himself spoke up in response.
おいユキ、貴様、一体自分が誰を相手にしているのか分かっているんだろうな。
愛人がいないと何もできない解消なしの男でしょ。
なんだと？
Yuki imagined his red face flushed with anger. As she provoked him, she listened to the ambient sounds in the background. The roaring sound of the sea breeze announced that he was indeed outside the warehouse.
ユキ、望みは何だ？
ハル、立てこもり犯にいきなり要求を聞いてはいけないわ。
まずは仲良くなってからって言いたいのか。
そう。今の私はあなたの知らない人なのよ。
バ 顔言うな。ユキはユキだろ。ミズハもきっと悲しんでる。私もそうだ。未だに信じられない。
Yuki laughs at Haru's emotional voice. If she doesn't, the guilt will tear her apart.
まるでコントね、ハル。お前たちは完全に包囲されてる。ほら、田舎のお母さんも泣いているぞって。
ユキ、
少し黙ってよ、ハル。あまり感情をぶつけてくると犯人が興奮して取り返しのつかないことになるわよ。
She looks at her bound sister with an icy glare.
私の要求を言うわ、ハル。
Yuki suddenly says.
今から1時間以内に車を1台用意すること。
それだけじゃないんだろう。
さすがにわかる？
逃げるだけならわざわざ理事長を呼んだりしない。
話が早くて助かるわ。
理事長を車に乗せてどこに行こうって言うんだ。
さあ、少なくとも理事長にとって楽しいドライブではなさそうね。
Yuki could hear Haru's breathing stop over
わ
the
かっ
phone.
た？質問はない？これから先車が届くまで一切の交渉は打ち切るわ。
Negotiators try to do what they can to get a reaction out of the criminal. After all, if the criminal is completely unresponsive, negotiations wouldn't have much of a leg to stand on. Yuki knows that and plans to avoid all unnecessary contact with
Yuki.
Haru.
要求を飲まなかったらどうするつもりだ。
あら、何のための人質だと思ってるの？水葉は置物じゃないのよ。
嘘はよすんだ。ユキにそんな真似はできない。
何？勝手に決めつけてるのよ、ある。
Yuki feigned composure, but the anger inside her was erupting into
あ
a
なた
mighty
が私の
tempest.
何を知っているっていうの？逆に聞くけど、春だって私に魔王のことは教えなかったじゃない？いい？誰にだって深い闇があるのよ。親にも友達にも相談できないようなストレスを抱えているの。あなただってそうでしょ？だから友達だからとかそういう甘ったるい考えはやめてもらえる？
Following that final provocation, Haru's voice changed
魔王
entirely.
のことは教えなかった。だと。
Yuki had finally let slip her connection to Mao. It was unimportant, though. Haru's connection to him, her absurd blood loss, had been a case in Yuki's point. It was likely her deepest darkness, one of the
私は
secrets unknown
魔王
to
を
himself.
知っているわ。ええ、宿を借りたことすらある仲よ。彼は歪んでいるけれど信念を持った男だわ。あなたと同じようにね。
The gauntlet had been thrown.
分かったよ、ユキ。
Haru said as her tension noticeably
お
doubled.
前が魔王と関わっているのであれば、そして魔王を肯定するのであれば、私も容赦はしない。
怖いわね。
Despite her sarcasm, Yuki smiled.
とにかく
fresh.
1時間以内よ。遅れたら勇者の大切な仲間が傷つくことになるから急いでね。
いいだろう。
Haru punctuated her response by hanging up on Yuki.
変さん。
The younger sister was uneasy. Nevertheless, she merely looked up at Yuki as if she were worried for her sake. Haru had allowed her anger to show through her poker face. A display of tension during a negotiation can excite the
自分の心配をしたら、水葉。今の私の話を聞いていたでしょ？私があなたを傷つけないだなんて、甘ったるく決めつけないで。
Fear consumed Mizuha's eyes, and Yuki was satisfied. That woman has got to be kidding. I tried to snap Usami out of the trance she's been in since the call ended.
昔ユキはお母さんと二人でひっそり暮らしていた時のことを面白おかしく話してくれました。頼れる親戚もなく、北陸の庄村にある町工場で住み込みで働いていたそうです。お金がなくて着るものにも困るありさまでしたが、いつでもお母さんが助けてくれました。
Sounds familiar somehow.
ある時、村にダムを誘致するしないで村中が賛成派と反対派に分かれ、 揉めたことがありました。ユキのお母さんは建設会社に勤めていた経験から工事の必要性を感じ賛成派に回ったそうです。しかし結果的にダムの建設は中止になりました。すると賛成に票を投じていた人たちはどうなったと思います？
Alright, I get it already. I'm no good with these kinds of stories. I shook my head, not wanting to hear more. I had a similar experience. Family standing is important in a small village. Tokita and her mother were ostracized, right?
ええ、ユキたち親子の住む家も火事で全焼したそうですよ。
Oh, come on. That's just way too far out there.
いいえ、ユキは放火だと言っていました。
Not that any legal ramifications could have addressed the root of the problem. Still, if what the director said was true, she had it coming to her. Everything was fine until she embezzled money from this company, right?
ユキの話では横領の事実はなかったそうです。それについてはとても信憑性のある話を聞きました。
You can't say for certain that she wasn't lying to you, or that she had her facts straight in the first place.
それでもユキに非はありません。
It doesn't matter whose fault it was, Usami. Good people have bad luck too. There's no point in holding grudges so long for every little thing. What are we arguing about? Let's just try to stick to the problem at hand.
はい。
We closed in on each other and talked in whispers. What do we know? Tokita demanded a car. She plans on taking the director hostage and running away somewhere. Her ultimate objective is likely to kill him.
まさしくその通りですね。
Then what's our best course of action? Prepare a car as demanded?
ひとまずは
Usami thought silently for a moment. Alright, I'll get on it. It shouldn't take anywhere near an hour. I arranged for the car to get here immediately.
ねえ、水葉。
Yuki broke the silence as she twirled her hair in mourning.
結局、京介くんにはあのことは伝えられたの？
今そんなことはどうだっていいじゃない。
今が最後のチャンスになるかもしれないっていうのに。
Mizuha stared straight into Yuki. It was an unshakably resolute stare, one that defied the gravity of her situation.
そのマフラー、暖かい？
Mizuha nodded.
いつあげたのか覚えてる？
私が風邪をひいた時。
嬉しかった？
Mizuha's idle stare transformed into a blissful expression. Her eyes narrowed as she reminisced on days gone by. She was weak to old times. Yuki suddenly posed a question to her sister, snapping her
ど
out
う
of
し
her
て
trance.
頼りの一つもくれなかったの？
それはだからどこに住んでるのかも知らなかったから。
探してくれてもよかったじゃない？
ごめんなさい。
私の母さんが肺炎で倒れた時、マフラーのことを思い出したわ。
Mizuha interrupted her with a sob.
私にあげなければよかった。
Yuki sneered at Mizuha as tears filled her eyes.
だってあなたは私を探さないで父親のもとでぬくぬくしていたんでしょ？
そんなつもりは。
今回だってそうじゃない。水葉は私の誘いを断った。あなたさえ協力してくれればもっと楽に理事長を脅迫できたのよ。つまりあなたは私より父親を選んだってこと。
姉さん、もうやめてよ。こんなの姉さんらしくないよ。
水葉こそ情に訴えるのはやめてよ。私はもうあなたと雪だるまを作ってた頃の私じゃないのよ。
Mizuha looked down and desperately continued.
そんなに父さんが憎いの？
当たり前でしょ。
Yuki said as her eyes snapped open.
一時の感情に身を任せて復讐しているわけじゃないの。 あいつに対する恨みと憎しみは時が経つにつれて消えるどころかどんどん強くなっていったわ。
でも姉さんたちが家を出て行ったのは理由が。
横領の話？私の母さんがそんなことするはずないでしょ。それはあなたの父親の内部工作よ。平たく言えば愛人に手切れを言い渡したかっただけ。証拠を見せましょうか。私はちゃんと調べたのよ。
Mal had helped her investigate the circumstances surrounding her exile about 1 year ago. Come to think of it, it was likely at that moment, the moment she sold herself to the devil, that the wheels of her revenge had
家を
begun to
追い出
spin.
された当時、母さんが病気がちだったのは覚えてる？
Mizuha didn't respond. She was likely too young to remember those days, but Yuki would never forget. She would never forget the blood on her mother's lips and hands as she coughed out her lungs, or the smiling face she used to tell Yuki that everything was fine. How could that man throw a woman in that condition out into the
そ
cold?
りゃあ分かってるわよ。愛人だもの。いつかは切られる運命にあったんでしょうね。でも不倫にも筋ってものがあるでしょう。何も路頭に迷わせなくてもいいじゃない。
Yuki knew complaining to Mizuha about her mother's pain and humiliation wouldn't do any good, but she couldn't help herself.
あいつが母さんを殺したも同然なの。それは分かってよ、水葉。
何もこんなことしなくても。
Yuki gave up. Mizuha maybe her sister, but she's still an outsider. There's no way she could understand. Even Yuki couldn't muster the empathy to consider other people's problems to her own. Once upon a time, each of those countless convicts had told her a life story, but she had listened to it as an unconcerned bystander. Yuki decided to respond leniently.
復讐が問題の解決にならないことは知っているわ。でもね、救いにはなるのよ。復讐こそが唯一の救いだと思い込んでしまったら、もう後には引けないわ。
As if to punctuate the end of her thoughts, the phone rang. Yuki quickly drew in a breath and exhaled
早かった
before
わ
answering.
ね、春。
望み通り車は用意した。
上出来ね。すぐ出られるようにエンジンはかけっぱなしにしておいてちょうだい。
本当に逃げられると思っているのか。
カーチェイスをするつもりはないわよ。絶対に追ってこないでね。追っ手の影でも見えればその場で海にでも突っ込むわよ。
正気じゃないな。
正気でこんなことができると思う？
たとえ私たちを振り切ったとしてもだ。警察がユキを追うぞ。
でしょうね。今度こそ警察を頼らない理由がないもの。
一生逃げるつもりか。今日捕まるか明日捕まるかって怯えながら毎日暮らすのか。
あらあら、容赦はしないとか言っておきながらまだ説得しようっていうの？甘いんじゃないの？
Haru had apparently ignored Yuki's provocation as she countered
ユ
with a
キ
deadly
を追うの
blow.
はユキのお父さんだぞ。
そんなはずないじゃない。
She answered coldly.
娘が罪を犯したら捜査から外されるわ。父さんもまた田舎に逆戻り。
よくわかってるじゃないか。もう一度言う。今ならまだことは公にはならない。まだやり直せる。今すぐそこから出てくるんだ。
同行したとして魔王の仲間である私はどうなるの？あなたや京介君のお仲間さんたちに暴行されるんじゃないの？
そんなことはない。
Haru's faltering voice betrayed her hesitance, but even if Haru had a change of heart, the Soniyama man outside would wring every last drop of blood from Yuki. They'd been chasing Mal for a good while now, too.
話はこれまでよ。次の要求を言うわ。
Yuki glimpsed at Mizuha. Her sister was already lost for words, dark with despair. I listened to Tokida's demands over the receiver.
そこの理事長に質問があるの。
なんだ、何が聞きたい？
重要なことよ。正直に答えてね。
She prefaced herself with that before continuing.
私と母さんが北陸の小さな村に住んでいた時、うちの
の家に火を放った男を知らないかしら。
何を言ってんのかわからん。
いいえ、知っているはずよ。あれはあなたの指示。
知らんもんは知らん。
本当の目的は母さんが持っていたあなたの裏帳簿よね。おかげで何もかも燃えちゃったわ。よかったわね。
The director shook his head frantically, obviously in a panic.
あの時は村の人も私たちに冷たかったからろくに調べもなかったわ。家がなくなったおかげで母さんの病状も悪化した。この意味がわかる？
It means whoever was responsible for that fire took years off Tokida's mother's life.
教えなさい。あなたの手のものだっていうのは分かっているのよ。
火を放てなどと命じてはいない。
盗みに入れって命じたんでしょ。でも見つからなくてめんどくさいから火をつけた。こんなところかしら。
違う。あれはお前たちを心配して。そうだ、片倉君にはお前たち親子の近況を聞きに行けと。
片倉っていうの？あなたの会社の社員？大層出世したんじゃない？
取締役の一人だ。それがどうした？
決まってるじゃない。片倉もここに呼びなさい。共犯の中なんだから身近に置いているんでしょ。
バカを言うな。放火の証拠なんてないだろう。それに今何時だと思っているんだ。無関係な人間を巻き込むな。
無関係かどうかは私が決めるの。わからない？ここは私の法廷なの。
Her voice was cold enough to freeze one's blood. Sir, I think it would be best to comply with your demands for now.
しかし
Look, if need be, I can get my father to erase certain things. You know what I mean? I just made up some nonsense, but it seemed to do the job just nicely.
いやもうええんな。
He reluctantly agreed.
部下への連絡が終わったら中に入ってきてもらえる？
なぜだ？
嫌なの。
Tokida's voice was brimming with rage.
あなたが来れば水葉を解放してあげるわ。
Sweat trickled from the director's forehead.
実の娘の命がかかってるのよ。あなたみたいな鬼畜でもさすがに水葉は見捨てられないでしょ。
待て。私に何をする気だ？
それは来てのお楽しみよ。さあ早くして。
He looked at me as if looking for help. Well, I don't have the right to force him into it. He blinks over and over, and his hand balls into a clumsy fist.
わかった。
待ってください。
Sami grabs the director's shoulder with her free hand.
危険すぎます。
しかし
春、何のつもり？
At Yuki's prompting, Usami declares her thoughts with seemingly absolute confidence.
ユキ、お前に水葉を傷つけられるはずがない。これはつまり人質が人質としての意味をなさないということだ。
そう思ってるんだ。
だからこそ理事長をそちらに行かせるわけにはいかない。
I see. She can't kill the territory, but she can kill the director. If she had the director held hostage instead of her own sister, she could feasibly make outrageous demands.
なるほど。さすがは春ね。私の思惑をあっさりと見破ってくれる。でも誤解をしているようだからちょっと教えてあげるわ。
何？
The sound of flesh being harshly beaten jumped from the receiver, and perfectly coinciding with that, Shiratori's screams followed suit.
聞こえた？
Tokida's cruelty manifested itself in Shiratori's gasps.
ユキ、
Usami's brows tensed, and after some time she began to speak.
今のは何だ。
本を殴ったの。ちょうど今倉庫の中で古びた釘を見つけたわ。次はこれを使おうかしら。
やめるんだ。
私の言うことをおとなしく聞いてくれればやめてあげる。
Someone nearby had had enough and jumped into the conversation.
わかった。今行くから娘を解放してくれ。
いいパパじゃない。その優しさを少しは私にも分けてほしかったものだわ。
I decided to speak up and mustered the calmest voice I could. Hey, Tokida, you're not lying when you say you'll release Shiratori if we hand over the director, are you?
もちろんよ。信じて。
I'd love to. You just don't seem too trustworthy right now.
さすがは京介くんね。初めて会った時からあなたと私は似た者同士だと思っていたわ。
You mean like the way we think?
いいえ。心に複雑な闇を抱えているという意味で。
Alright, look, I've had enough of this. It's trump card time. Either Shiratori comes out or we're
強
coming
行
in.
突入ってこと？
Well, let's see. We've got a couple dozen men out here with crystal bowls, so I'm gonna say yes, I do. And I'll also say that if it comes to that, you're through.
でしょうね。そういうところ、ますます気に入ったわ。
Good one, Tokida. We'll see who's laughing when these guys drag you out of hiding. Actually, we already have a route into the warehouse. There's a window up on the side. It's about 5 yards off the ground, but that shouldn't be a problem if we can get a few men standing on each other's shoulders. Still, that should be a last resort.
どう京介くん、私と組まない？私はそれなりに役に立つと思うのだけれど。
Sure, sounds great, honestly. We can hammer out the specifics once you come out of there.
そうね。じゃあ、理事長を引き渡してちょうだい。
ダメです。
Usami stopped the director a second time as he started toward the warehouse's entrance.
話してくれ。もう私が行くしかないんだ。
いけません。犯人はあなたを殺害するつもりなんですよ。
Usami finally called Tokida a criminal. It was likely a measure she took to kill her personal feelings toward her friend.
強情ね、ハル。そこの男は最低の類の人間なのよ。
たとえ最低の人間だとして見殺しにはできない。
Tokida gave a short, nasal laugh.
あなたはだから友達が少ないのよ。そうやって正義風を吹き回しているとね、みんなうさんくさいと思うものなのよ。勇者様が人々に尊敬されるのはゲームの中だけよ。
とにかく人質の交換はしない。
そうやって強硬な姿勢を取り続けていると最悪の事態が待っているわよ。
ダメなものはダメだ。理事長、下がってください。
Usami managed to stare the director down as he took 2 steps back.
まったく優秀なネゴシエーターね。
Tokida remarked sarcastically.
また連絡するわ。
Usami let her arm holding the phone slide down as a sigh escaped her lips. Are you sure we made the right call there, Usami?
理事長を人質に取られたら終わりです。
I realize that, but we can't just let Shiratori die.
ユキは水葉に危害を加えたりしません。
Why are you still acting so naive? She just hit Shiratori a few seconds ago.
いいえ、あれはハッタリです。
How can you say that? We heard the whole thing, didn't we?
よく考えてください。もしユキが本当に水葉の頬を平手でぶったのであれば、バチンという音と同時に 水葉の悲鳴が上がるはずがありません。
She's right. If Shiratori really had been smacked, she'd have gone speechless from the shock.
おそらく水葉の目の前で自分の両手を叩いただけでしょう。猫だましみたいなものです。水葉は驚いて悲鳴を上げただけです。
Which would mean...
犯人にはまだ良心が残っているということです。
Still, huh?
今のはユキのミスです。そんなハッタリをしてこなければ我々も二の足を踏むものを。
But as it played out, she practically told us she won't be hurting Shiratori anytime soon.
先ほども言ったように、これはつまり人質が人質として機能していないということです。
Which means we've got the edge.
ええ。
Sami nodded as she stared at the warehouse's wall.
あそこに窓がありますね。
Jeez, looks like things have taken a turn for the worse, Yuki thought. She paced around Mizuha with her arms folded. As Yuki had realized from this one onset, her hostage was a weak excuse for one at best. She should have known Kara would realize this too. The fact that she had been able to recognize Yuki's assault as a bluff only compounded the problem. She needed to force a hostage swap quickly before things got any worse. Mizuha, who had kept silent until now, suddenly raised her head. Her eyes were utterly vacant.
さっきは驚かせてごめんね。
Yuki subconsciously allowed her guilt to squeeze out an apology. She may have been jealous, envious of her sister's comfortable upbringing, but she was not yet prepared to cross the line of violence against this innocent girl. Mizuha muttered a quiet response before returning her gaze to the floor. Yuki was nervous about the upcoming raid. As long as they know she won't harm Mizuha, they might force their way in at any time. They'll most likely try to enter via the warehouse window. If she puts up a fight at the bottleneck there, she might be able to drive away one or two men, but these opponents were muscle from head to toe. Each man she knocked out would stand right back up and try again. Haru hadn't wasted any time. A bulky black shadow stood menacingly still at the window. What do I do now? Yuki looked down at Mizuha. Mizuha returned her gaze.
姉さん、あのね。
She said in a sickeningly sweet voice. Yuki would have to cross that line. What's going on in there? I asked one of Gonzo's subordinates for a quick report. One of the smaller men had been given a boost up to the window and was peeking through.
よく見えませんね。窓ぶち壊しましょうか。
I casually looked over to Usami.
いいんですか？
Of course. Oh, I never told you. Sorry. This warehouse is managed by the Izai Corporation.
それはすごい偶然ですね。
Now that I think about it, it is. Why did Tokyo choose this place anyway? Well, whatever. It doesn't matter. Alright, on three. 1, 2...
ちょっとお待ちを。
What?
ユキからメールです。
A text message? Why didn't she just call you?
画像が添付されています。これは
Usami's expression grew severe. I reflexively peeked at Usami's cell phone. What the? Shiratori had been cut by a sharp object. A stream of blood trickled down her thigh. The wound looked shallow, but the meaning behind that fresh blood brought a shudder to my spine. Tokita... She really did it. All that time at school must have made me go soft. Sisters. Sisters, give me a break. My heart froze up. Hey, Usami, let's call off the raid for now. She was likely shocked speechless. She just stared wide-eyed at her phone's LCD. The phone began to ring with a clamor. Asami's dumbfounded gaze stayed perfectly still as her hand pulled the phone to her ear.
画像見てくれた？
あ
私が本気だってこと分かってもらえたかしら？
Asami didn't answer, so I spoke up in her place. People will do anything when they're cornered, huh?
そうよ。ひどく腐った気分だわ。生まれ変わるってこういうことなのかも。
You're going to hell, Tokita.
あなたもでしょ？
I may have let my guard down too much around this woman. As my disappointment in Tokita peaked, the director called out to her from behind me.
事情は分かった。もう勘弁してくれ、ユキ。
Tokita's cruelty to the director wasn't abated in the least by his submissive behavior. She had no mercy, even for a man who'd gone pale at seeing his daughter's bloodshed.
だったらとっとと来てもらえるかしら？
ああ、今行く。
片倉への連絡は済んだ？
先ほど済ませた。30分以内に来るそうだ。
Asami's arm didn't shoot out to stop him this time. She just watched the director's back as he trudged toward the warehouse.
おかしい。
Asami quietly muttered something. It was true when she said she felt awful. Yuki cut the call and looked at the wound on Mizuha's
こ
stomach.
れでいいんだよね、姉さん。
ありがとう。
Yuki struggled to say. A few moments earlier, the very moment that Yuki had seen the shadow at the window, Mizuha suddenly moaned. Look, Mason. Yuki's eyes shot open. Mizuha had stood up by herself despite her hands being bound and edged over to one of the many sealed containers in the warehouse. Yuki nearly screamed out in an attempt to stop her, but it was too late. Mizuha raised her thigh to the sharp corner of the container and dropped herself onto it. The sharp steel corner mercilessly tore her bare leg. Without even crying out in pain, Mizuha turned to address her sister. Will you trust me already? Without even thinking, Yuki had snapped an image with her camera phone and sent it to Haru. She felt downright awful. Yuki untied the rope binding Mizuha
大
and
丈
inspected,
夫よ。
and inspected
も
her
う
wound.
血は止まっているみたい。
もう痛くないから安心して。
それにしてもなぜ？
Mizuha shook her
姉
head.
さんに味方するって決めたの。
嘘をつかないで。今さら遅すぎるわよ。
Despite her words, Yuki hated herself for not trusting her sister.
あなたの父親を殺そうっていうのよ。それに加担するっていうの？
Mizuha nodded as if she had given up on everything.
納得がいかないわ。
だって姉さんのすることだから。私姉さんのこと好きだから。
気持ち悪いこと言わないでよ。
考えたの、さっきからずっと。
何を？
今までの私、怖がりで思ってることも口に出せなくて、子供っぽい私のこと、声をかけたい人ともまともに喋れなかった。
Mizuha paused for a second time and stared at Yuki.
姉さんが来るまで友達らしい友達もいなかったの。父さんが警察に容疑をかけられて毎日肩身の狭い思いだった。姉さんが来て変わったわ。ここ数日は本当に楽しかったから。クラシックの鑑賞会楽しかった。
そう。
あの後浅井くんとご飯食べてたんだよ。彼 A 型だって。全部姉さんのおかげだよ。昔から姉さんといるといつでも楽しかった。
Mizuha's direct, straightforward gaze became painful to Yuki.
雪だるまの名前覚えてる？
雪太郎でしょ。くだらない。
Mizuha laughs feebly.
また一緒に作りたいなって思ったら決心がついたの。私姉さんと一緒に地獄に落ちるよ。
Yuki's chest threatened to rip apart, such was the pain. She desperately looked over Mizuha's whole body. Eyes, hands, feet, mouth. Not a part of her little sister told her she was lying.
水葉
Yuki prudently scrutinized her again.
父さんは世間で知られている以上に悪いことをたくさんしているの。姉さんたちだけじゃない。いつもうまいことやって切り抜けてきたみたいだけど、そろそろ報いを受けるべきなのよ。警察じゃなくて姉さんに裁かれるならしょうがないと思う。
Yuki could hear the infantile naivety in Mizuha's words. She was in an emotional tizzy due to the extreme situation. Saying one is willing to engage in cold, premeditated murder is based on a temporary emotion immediately raises a red flag. Most likely, Mizuha is actually hoping for a situation where both the director and Yuki could be saved. It's impossible for her to hide her soft heart from Yuki's senses.
どうしてだろうね。
Mizuha started with a touch of happiness.
私たちはこんなに違うの。
違う
全然違うじゃない。見た目も雰囲気も話す言葉一つとっても違うわ。
そんなもの育った環境が違うからに決まってるじゃない。
そうだよね。そして姉さんはそれを恨んでるんだね。
Yuki realized Mizuha's tone had been growing more
似
firm.
ていたかったの？なぜ？
なんとなく姉妹だから。
血は半分しかつながってないのよ。
だから
今からそれすらも断ち切ろうとしているのよ。二人の唯一の共通点である父親を殺すのだから。
唯一。
あなたが言ったことじゃない。私たちはまるで似ていないわ。私はおしゃべりが好き。あなたは寡黙。私は現実的で水葉は夢見がち。何か似ているところがある？
One mustn't forget to mention that Yuki is an illegitimate child, while Mizuha was born to her proper family. There was a distinct gap there.
人前だと姉さんの真似をして気ぐらいが高そうに振る舞っていたの。
Yuki laughed involuntarily.
バカね。自分を偽ったってすぐにわかるわよ。
うん、バカだった。今度からしない？
今度があると思うの？親を殺しておいて未来があるとでも？
Yuki reprimanded Mizuha harshly with her tone, and her sister fell silent. Mizuha's fingers twitched faintly. She was getting cold feet. Yuki sighed and looked at her niece for a moment. As she suspected, this girl wouldn't be able to commit a crime, and Yuki would never be able to hurt her, the innocent child that she is.
資料足りないわね、水葉。もういいわ。私を助けようだなんて軽々しく言わないで。
そんな。私は本気だよ。
いいのよ。さっきのは嬉しかった。私が困っているのをただ見ていられなかったのね。
本気だってば姉さんの力になりたいんだって。
無理しなくていいの。私に嘘は通じないってよく知ってるでしょ。
At that moment, a loud rapping echo resounded from the
おい
warehouse door.
ユキ、ここを開けろ。
It was followed shortly by the voice of her mother's murderer. Director Shiratori shouted at the wall of the warehouse. He intends to become a hostage of his own volition. Are you sure you want to do this, or? I talked briefly with him as I waited beside him. He might just be killed on the spot.
じゃあどうしろというのかね。 娘を傷物にされて黙っていろとでも。
You're a good father. Now that I've had a moment to look at him, I've realized he actually looks quite villainous. His sly, Volpine face was hideously warped. He's almost as tall as Gonzo, and no wonder, being Tokida's father, but at the moment he looked withered and small. Tokida's voice came to us via Usami's cell phone.
今から扉を開けるわ。言っておくけど、下手な真似をしたら水葉の命はないわよ。聞いてるの、ハル。
もうやめよう、ユキ。
何を言い出すの？これからがいいところじゃない。
終わりにしようと言っているんだ。
何それ？
出てくるんだ。
話にならないわ。京介くん、聞こえてるんでしょ？
Yeah.
今、私は水葉の首に釘を突きつけている。この意味がわかるわよね。
Yeah. If you open the door and we come charging in, we'll do her in.
じゃあ準備はいい？
I looked at the director. He nodded from in front of the door.
開けるわよ。
ちょっと待て、ユキ。
Usami butted in once again.
少し時間が欲しい。もうちょっと待ってくれないか。
どうして？
頼む。
自分の立場を考えてよね。あなたの頼みを聞く理由がないわ。
とにかく理事長はそちらには渡さない。
Usami hung up on Tokita and stood in front of the warehouse door.
おい君。
Move, Usami. I don't really care what happens anymore. I'm not Tokita or Shiratori's friend. I'm definitely not a cop. Why do I have to go out on a limb for this? Why in heck did I end up calling Soniyama men?
待ってください。まだユキが水葉を傷つけたという確証がないんです。
Hey, you saw the picture, didn't you? Why was Shiratori bleeding if Tokita didn't cut her?
わかりませんが、水葉がユキに協力したという可能性があります。
I realize that, but who on earth would go so far as to cut themselves?
ありえない話ではないです。
People like that only exist in fiction. You're grasping at straws so that you can keep trusting Tokita for some bizarre reason.
私が寒いのはこの際どうでもいいです。とにかくもう少し様子を見たいんです。
You heard her, sir. What do you think?
宇佐美君と言ったね。君はユキの友人だそうだが、一体何者なんだい？
私が何者であるかもこの際どうでもいいです。とにかく理事長、あなたが中に入ったら我々はおしまいです。
Sami's cell phone rings again. However, she showed no desire to answer it. Without Tokita's orders, the director wouldn't be able to enter the warehouse. Oh, for Christ's sake, just do whatever the heck you want. I jerked my chin at the director. It's not like waiting around for this Katakura guy will hurt anything.
ユキは今すぐ私が中に入ってくることを望んでいるんだぞ。
I shrugged and waved him away. Oh, come on. She's not going to kill her if you don't go in there right this instant. That would be utterly stupid. Even if she tried, worst case scenario, we break the window and rush in. It's not my problem that Shiratori's life is in danger. Still, Usami,
はい。
you may have annoyed a culprit, angered a culprit, but am I right in assuming that's part of some strategy? And now I'm getting the silent treatment. This is freaking me out. I don't know if I can go on much longer. What in God's name is she doing? Tokita Yuki called hard twice, but
ど
neither
う
call was
したん
answered.
だろう。
Mizuha's fear got the best of her, and she decided to ask directly.
何があっても理事長を引き渡さないつもりね。まったく げてるわ。犯人からの入電を無視するなんて。私が異常者だったらとっくに人質は殺されてるわよ。
姉さんは異常者じゃないよ。
そう思ってるつもりだけどね。
だって私のことは大事に思ってくれているもの。のりこ先生にも悪いと思ってるんでしょ。無関係な人を巻き込みたくはないからよ。
But Yuki did drag people into it. Desperate times call for desperate measures, and one never knows how far they'll go until they live the situation themselves.
またどこか怪我してみせようか。
やめなさい。
She answered immediately.
逆に怪しまれるわ。
Maybe. More importantly, Yuki didn't want to have to see her sister's blood.
春にはバレちゃったのかな。私がわざと怪我をしたって。
断定はできないはずよ。だからこそ彼らも窓からの突入をためらった。
The precariousness of the situation weighed on Yuki's mind. The greatest weakness of her position was the poor choice of hostage. As it stood, a proper negotiation was out of the question. Nevertheless, horror should be out of options. For now, at least.
もう一度電話してみたら。
Mizuha was cooperative with Yuki to the bitter end. Yuki shook her head.
いいえ。向こうからかけてくるのを待つわ。
When that happens, Haru will have prepared some sort of scheme. There goes my advantage. The stalemate continued for 30 minutes. Kusami just stared firmly at the warehouse with her arms folded the whole time. The director must have smoked through a whole pack of cigarettes in agitation. Eventually, an unfamiliar luxury car pulled over, its engine roaring loudly. Director Shiratori greeted the man who stepped out of the driver's seat. Katakura had finally arrived. He was a short man. The director briefed him on the situation, looking sharply downward into his eyes. Katakura's small hands moved about restlessly as he did so. He wore thin glasses as if to hide the brutal glow radiating from the eyes beneath them. Will Ichi be like that when he gets older? Nah, Katakura looks a lot slyer than Ichi could ever be. What's up, Usami? Just standing around, waiting for the sunrise? Your cell battery must be almost dead by now.
ですね。
Usami nodded, slipping in a glance at the director and Katakura.
そろそろ勝負を決めましょう。
Her gaze pierced through me.
浅井さんは私が正義の味方か何かと思っていらっしゃいますね。
Sure, though to be honest, I wish you'd stop waving that annoying justice around all the time.
そんなつもりは全くないんですよ。
Is that so?
今から説明するやり口を聞いたら納得してくださると思います。
You mean I won't think you're a hero of justice anymore?
はい、むしろ下道です。できることならこんなやり方はしたくなかった。でも他に方法が思いつきません。
Man, talk about a hook. You got me interested
し
now.
かも賭けの要素もあります。成功したとしてもユキが抵抗を諦めるという確証がありません。我ながら情けない話ですが。
Cut the hype and spill it already. Usami paused in hesitation and continued.
お願いがあるんです、浅井さん。
What?
どうかユキを助けてもらえませんか。
Help her? What's she on about now? Define help. You mean you want me to capture her and hand her over to the police? Or do you want me to kill her old man for her?
理事長も死なずユキも警察の厄介になることはない。
So a fairy tale happy ending? Well, I guess I don't really want to explain this to the cops either.
分かってます。浅井さんには関係のない話だというのは。ここまで付き合ってもらってありがとうございました。
What am I supposed to do now?
最後にもう一度だけ力を借りたいのです。お願いします。
To be honest, if I stopped here, I'd probably have a hard time sleeping at night. The girl knows something about Mal. Tell you what, I won't leave until I get that story out of her. I think it would make a pretty nice gift for Gonzo.
ありがとうございます。
Let's just cut to this dirty plan of yours. I've known you for too long. I'm used to your dramatics.
嬉しいです。
This girl is disgusting.
私は未だにユキを信じています。水葉を含め無抵抗な人を傷つけたりはしないと。例えばいかに憎き理事長とはいえ命乞いをされればユキも思いとどまるかもしれません。
You do?
そこで考えました。これは何とも危険な作戦です。しかも作戦を立てた私は安全という卑劣な。
Usami raised a finger and continued. Wow, the ploy really was a monstrously risky gamble. So long. How long lasts the phone ring? It was Haru. You keep bracing herself against whatever trap Haru had set for her. Answered the
待ち
call.
くたびれちゃったわよ。
ごめん、気持ちの整理がつかなくて。
言い訳はいいから。とっとと理事長を中に入れてもらえる？
Man, Yuki, you're scary. The director's voice butted in.
わかった。ここを開けろ。
いいのね。ある？
ああ、やむを得ないという話になった。
Sounds like an act. Still, Yuki had to wait and see how things
結
proceeded.
構だわ。じゃあ入ってきてちょうだい。今から扉を開けるわ。
Yuki ended the call and walked to the warehouse's entrance.
姉さん、私はどうすれば。
あなたはもう必要ないわ。理事長が入ってきたら解放してあげる。
Mizuha shook her head obstinately.
姉さんの力になりたいよ。
なぜ？
だって今まで姉さんに何もしてあげられなかったから。姉さんに助けられるばっかりじゃ悪いよ。
Yuki objectively found that comment rather foolish, but nevertheless, it warmed her heart
と
somehow.
にかく私はここを動かないから。
Yuki turned again and went for the door, ignoring Mizuha as she stubbornly plopped herself to the ground, or on the ground. On the ground. Immediately thereafter, I heard the sound of a latch being unlocked. The door slid open horizontally, and moonlight poured into the warehouse.
どうぞ。
Tokita peeked out, letting only her face show, and gestured the director to come in. It would probably be dangerous to just jump in and rush Tokita. She might be holding the nail to Shigetori's throat behind the door, out of sight. The director walked in with fear written all over his face.
じゃあね。また連絡するわ。
Tokita all but laughed as she quickly shut the door. In the end, this really was our only choice. Usami silently watched over the situation's development. What was Haru's objective? Yuki carefully invited the director into the warehouse.
助けて。私死にたくない。
A voice called out from a spot on the floor behind Yuki. Mizuha was still managing to act her role. She sat on the ground with her arms behind her back, pretending to be tied up. After seeing that scene, the director gave up all thoughts of
両手を上げ
resistance.
てちょうだい。下手な真似したらわかるでしょ。
姉さんの言うことを聞いて。お願い。
The director seemed to have given up completely as he raised his arms in surrender. His worn, middle-aged hands were oozing with sweat.
片倉は来た。
ああ、つい先ほど。
じゃあ後で呼ぶわ。
Yuki picked up a nearby crowbar.
さて、何か言い残すことがあれば聞くわよ。
すまなかった。マサミには悪いことをしたと思っている。
Yuki's mother's sacred name came out of that man's filthy lips. It sounded to her ears as
あ
if
ら
she
あ
slowly.
ら。ずいぶん態度が小さくなったわね。前にも謝ってくれたけど、その時はふんぞり返ってなかった？
葬儀にも出られなかったのは 私も悔やんでいたんだ。
お仕事が大変だったのね。
ああ、忙しくて。
お線香の一つもあげに来れないほど忙しかったのね。
Yuki mocked as her hatred
賄
erupted.
賂を受け取っている時間はあったのに。
The director flinched.
待て、私を殺して何になる？
There was a sly look in his eye.
こうは考えられないか、ユキ。私は確かに人格者ではない。そんな人間のために人生を棒に振ってどうするんだ？
そうね、それは何度も考えたわ。あなたを殺そうと思うたびにそういう考えが袖を引いたの。あなたは私の母さんを殺しておいて罪に問われないのに、なぜ私だけ刑務所に入らなければならないのかって。
そうだろう。落ち着いてもう一度考えるんだ。
The relieved look on his face tingled Yuki's sadistic
だ
heart.
からあなたを殺した後は日本から脱出するつもりなの。
Her discussions with the Mao's acquaintances had revealed an escape route to her. There was a smuggling boat which made regular trips between Japan's west coast and the Korean peninsula. Putting the watchful eyes of the state would be extremely difficult, but not impossible. Covering her backside after this incident wouldn't be all that hard. Yuki's largest concern lied elsewhere. Mizuha. She had been tricked, and despite being taken hostage, still loved Yuki as a sister. Could she really live with herself if she turned that kind-hearted girl into the sister of a murderer? Society was plenty cold enough to the Shiratori household without a case of patricide. Yuki wouldn't be the only one here throwing her
助けてくれ、ユキ。
That pleading insect could never induce hesitation in Yuki. However, Yuki thought back on her painful memories with her mother. She had coughed blood until she died, all the while cursing the man who told her to go die in the cold. Yuki placed her mother's suffering and her concern for Mizuha on the scale, anguishing over her inevitable decision. If she had known it would have turned out like this, she would have stayed away from Mizuha. Torrential guilt washed over her. The insectoid man before her seemed to be kind toward Mizuha, at least. That's what made him enter the warehouse, despite knowing the danger to himself. If she kills that man, Mizuha would no doubt grieve for him. Yuki's hateful adversary was, in the end, Mizuha's beloved father. She looked down once more at Mizuha. She was wading in a river of sadness that grew deeper by the moment, the one threatening to burst the upstream dam to bring tears of grief into the ever-smiling eyes of the Mizuha in her memories was none other than Yuki herself. Would it be acceptable for her to rob this girl of her father? I ought to stop this, Yuki clearly thought. No, wait! She had idly glanced at Director Shiratori. In that glance, she had just barely caught a glimpse of him reaching for his pocket. That glimpse proved enough to allow her to avoid the attack by a hair's width. I stood next to Usami, watching over the warehouse with bated breath. What do you think, Usami?
何がです？
About what's going on in there? Aren't you worried things might go sour?
まだ何もわかりません。
This is a pretty drastic measure for you. I mean, I guess that means it might catch Tokito off guard. Still.
ええ。
Sparks flew before her eyes. There was a static pop, like the sound of a discharging bug zapper as it kills a nearby moth. The director's hand closed in on her again. The black object, most likely some sort of taser, shot out at Yuki's face. She moved to the side in a frantic second dodge. The rumbling roar of electricity rolled past her as she reoriented herself in the battle. As Yuki hurled the crowbar, she still grabbed at her assailant, and she put some distance between herself and the surprise attack. After gaining enough ground to think calmly, Yuki scanned her surroundings for anything that could be used as a weapon.
やってくれるわね。
She mumbled between rough, distracted pants. That comment was directed at Haru. Yuki never expected she would try to use the hostage to take her down. As Yuki eyed her opponent, she realized his submissive aura had entirely disappeared. Director Shiratori was now grinning like a madman.
まったく親子揃って聞き分けのない女だ。
He drew one step nearer.
最初からそのつもりだったのね。
娘のためだ。
よく言うわよ。
She had been careless. She looked down at her haggard attacker.
おかしいと思ったのよ。あなたは水葉の代わりになるためにここに来たのに。 そんなことは一言も口にしなかった。
Now that she critically analyzes her memory of the director's entrance, she should have known this was coming. His eyes held some kind of point, and his lips stiff with fear for smears
私は
of
水
blood.
葉からあなたの悪口を聞いたことがないわ。だから油断してしまった。けれどあなたのいいところも聞いたことがない。
Mizuha was too sweet to speak up, so she had likely been sitting on her dissatisfaction for
面の
years.
皮の厚い男ね。まった
The director laughed.
少しぐらい弁が立たねば警察も手を引かんよ。
He had managed to avoid prosecution for the recent bribery scandal
く。
after
そう
all.
やって狡猾に立ち回った挙句、母さんに無実の罪を着せて追い出したのね。
何のことだか全くわからんな。ただ正美が出て行った年にはおかげで会社の保養所を建てることができたぞ。それについては正美の墓前で報告したいと思っている。
保養所という名の別荘でしょ。
It hadn't taken a genius to figure out that the money her mother supposedly embezzled had ended up in the director's
まった
pocket.
く人として恥ずかしくないの？
立てこもり犯に人の道を解かれる筋合いはないが、別に言い訳はせんよ。会社経営にはお前たち子供にはわからない苦労があるのだが、多くは語るまい。
下道の分際で何を余裕ぶっているのかしら。
子供にとって分かりやすい悪役でいてやろうという親心だよ。それとも私の身の上話でも聞きたいか？
結構よ。
Yuki knew that her biological father was also an illegitimate child. He had always hated his parents and used that drive to build a company from the ground up with nothing but the clothes on his
ユ
back.
キは昔から賢い娘だった。お前が再び私の前に現れた時、ただでは済まないだろうとは思っていた。だから先の学園で要求してきた500万くらいならくれてやってもいいんだぞ。
それはありがとうお父さん。
しかし殺人はまずい。復讐はもっと法の網から逃れやすい形で行うべきだ。
Those few words perfectly defined Director Shiratori. He wasn't a greedy, middle-aged buffoon, scared half to death of the police and the media's hounding. Neither was he a kind father, worried about his beloved Mizuha. He was a selfish, arrogant incarnation of evil.
もう諦めるんだ。表へ出よ。心配するな。警察に突き出したりはしない。娘が実刑を受けるのは忍びないからな。
呆れるわね。自分のスキャンダルをこれ以上増やしたくないだけでしょ。
Yuki's old curiosity idly wondered how a man with no sense of right and wrong became so powerful in society. He took another step toward her, laser brandished and ready. There was nowhere left to run. Yuki's back pressed against the crate, the taut tarp covering it, crinkling as she tried to retreat further. Then, her eyes shot wide open. Mizuha screamed. She had jumped out from behind the crate. She desperately clung to the director's arm from behind him. After a short struggle, the black weapon in his hand fell to the ground with a clang. The powerful device which had given the director his brash confidence was now on the floor. He roared and thrashed, shaking Mizuha off in the process. However, Yuki was already holding the director by the collar. Cool air rushed past her flushed face. Her flawless shoulder throw hurled the director quite a ways. His spine hit the concrete floor hard. He fainted in agony, his mouth still hanging open from the pain of the impact. Yuki caught her breath and looked down at her father, crumpled on the floor like a caterpillar.
思い直したわ。やっぱりあなたを殺すって。
姉さん。
ごめんね、ミズハ。でもあなたも悪いのよ。こんな父親を野放しにしておいたんだから。
Guilt tore at Yuki's heart as she spoke. She knew Mizuha had no hand in these events, but Yuki was powerless to halt what had already been put in motion. Urged forward by her overwhelming hate, Yuki tied the director's arms behind him.
よく考えたら私たちって姉妹じゃないじゃない。法律上の話ね。だから殺人犯の姉を持つってことにはならないじゃないの。私ったら何勘違いしてるのかしら。
何言ってるの？私たちは姉妹だよ。
そういうのはもういいわ。私たちは他人。助けてくれたのは感謝してる。でももうお別れよ。
Yuki picked up the long, narrow nail she had mentioned earlier and crouched at the director's
さ
side.
あ教えてちょうだい。
Yuki's expression must have been drenched in cruelty as the director's face quickly filled with
あなた
unmistakable fear.
片倉に命じて家に火を放ったのよね。
Yuki's rage dragged her mind back to the night her house burst into flames. The floor and walls looked at the young Yuki with the blazing red heat. Her mothers fought against time and an unconquerable illness to stand up, lift the half-asleep Yuki, and jump out the window. Yuki cried in her mother's scorched arms.
殺すわよ。
She thrust the nail at the director's neck. He promptly confessed through frantic breaths.
そうだ、私の指図だ。当時金に困っていた片倉君に話を持ちかけたんだ。しかし放火までしろとは言っていない。本当だ。
The devil in Yuki's heart gorged on her wrath.
じゃあなんで火がついたんだ。
やめろ、本当だ。
He said, his tears and saliva splattering across the room.
片倉君が勝手にやった。信じてくれ。
姉さん。
うるさい。
Words could no longer reach Yuki, nor could her consideration of Mizuha or her guilt toward Haru. Even her gratitude to and love for her foster father blew away into the storm of rage within her. That fierce wind took everything from Yuki until all that remained was an empty shell, one waiting for the awakened demon within her to fill the vacancy of her fast-floating soul left behind. Yuki punched the director in the face. After shaking his tears and saliva off her hand, she picked up her phone. There's another person I have to kill. The call was quickly
どうしたんだ
answered.
ユキ。理事長を引き渡したら水葉を解放してくれる約束じゃなかったのか。
What a smart girl. After giving the director that dangerous weapon, she has the nerve to act so innocent. Yuki laughed. Haru was a hypocrite after all.
ちょっとトラブルがあってね。でももう水葉には用はないから安心して。
Despite her voice, which still dripped with the flames of adrenaline, Yuki's mind was as cool as
片
ice.
倉が来てるらしいじゃないの。中に入れてもらえるかしら。あ、そう。嫌なんだ。じゃあこの人間のクズを殺すわ。
Yuki feared she might actually kill him on the spot, unconcerned about the
落ち着けユ
consequences.
キ。分かった。片倉さんも納得してくれている。
もう小細工はなしよ、ハル。あまり怒らせないでちょうだい。
ああ。
Yuki stood at the warehouse entrance once
開
more.
けるわ。
Perhaps Yuki's anger and Raptor were cool. She realized she was about to open the door without bringing along a hostage as a shield. What if they rush in as soon as I open the door? However, it was a needless worry. The sea breeze flew in. A short man stood on an arm's length away from her. Wore a suit and tin glasses. He wore a suit and tin glasses.
片倉ね。
そうだよ。
Yuki immediately pulled the man to her chest using her right arm. Her left hand wielded the nail. The moment she pushed the nail against Katakura's neck, a voice rang out against her. I shouted the second Tokita reached out for the man with the door. Now, Usami! This was her best chance, seeing as Tokita had defenselessly opened the door.
はい。
I held the warehouse door open to keep her from shutting it.
何のつもり？
Tokita's eyes opened wide. She wrapped her arm around her new hostage's neck from behind, holding him as a human shield. Her left hand held a glittering, long nail. She began a slow retreat. I waved my hand, signaling the Somiyama recruits to advance. They rushed into the warehouse after Usami and Tokita. As I ducked in after the last evaluating team entered the warehouse, I noticed a few cars in the distance heading this way. Okay, chill, girl. Chill,
これが見えないの？近寄ったら片倉を殺すわよ。
Yakuza men ignore Yuki's warning as they charged into the warehouse one after another. They kept a distance of about 5 yards from Yuki. They had her surrounded, forming a semicircle around her as she backed against the wall. Each one of them teemed with rage and exuded enough overwhelming force for Yuki to smell it. She addressed the leader of the pack, her old friend.
気でも触れたのハル。
ああ、これが最後の手段だった。
呆れるわね。よく考えてごらんなさい。状況は何も変わっていないのよ。
Yuki forced out a composed smile.
私は人質を取っている。今にも殺すことができる。
To be honest, even with them pending threat, the situation was more favorable than when Mizuha was her only hostage. The man squirming in her arms, the one called Katakura, was despicable enough to warrant at least 2 bloody deaths.
ユキ、落ち着け。
落ち着いてるわよ。
Indeed, she could take this man's life without so much as a quivering fingertip right now.
頼む。もうこんなバカなことはやめてくれ。私はユキが大好きなんだ。
大好きなら魔王のことを教えてくれてもよかったじゃない？
すまない。下手に話したら迷惑がかかると思ったんだ。
気遣いありがとう。おかげですれ違ったわね。
Yuki's arms tightened around Katakura's neck. She used excessive force for such a small hostage. Madness. You got feel her strength of her demonic proportions. She glanced at the director on the
今
floor.
油を注いだわね。あれ。
何？
一時はね、復讐なんてやめようかとも思ったのに。水葉のおかげでね。
Mizuha stood stone still, dumbfounded. She was obviously failing to comprehend the current
外
situation.
道の父親を持っているだけでも肩身が狭いのにね。その上、人殺しの姉まで加わったらいくらなんでもかわいそうでしょ。
In stark contrast to her words, Yuki's conscience was silent, all blamed with
あ
horror.
なたが理事長をけしかけなかったらハッピーエンドだったのにね。大した勇者様だこと。
Haru's face grew grave. She looked at the director with narrowed eyes full of anger. It's too late for regrets, Haru.
分かった。私が代わりに人質になろう。
冗談はやめてよ。確かにあなたには失望したけれど、それでもあなたを殺す理由はないわ。
そうか。
人質には人質たる理由がいるの。
Yuki stated the obvious. There was no reason to put up with Haru's begging any longer.
さあ、道を開けてちょうだい。車は用意してあるんでしょ。
ユキ。
それとも何？片倉を見殺しにしてでも私を捕まえる？言っておくけど、少しでも変な動きを見せたらその場で殺すわよ。何の遠慮もないわ。
Nevertheless, Haru refused to stand down.
何度でも言おう。その人を離すんだ。お前を人殺しにはさせない。
いい加減にしてよね。
Yuki sighed, then suddenly felt something amiss about the situation. Haru's behavior was odd. She was standing tall, staring straight at her opponent. It wasn't a very typical attitude when faced with defeat. Why? Why? Was she bluffing? Yuki felt that she could read Haru flawlessly after the time they spent together, yet much to her confusion and discomfort, Haru showed no signs of lying. How on earth did she plan on turning the situation around? Yuki attempted to calm and cool her mind as they raged in a storm of madness. Wait a second. She focused on the men surrounding her. Each of them bore a malevolent air. They looked as though they might pounce at any second. Wait, what are they waiting for? Yuki, now in a panic, reflexively turned to look at the back of Katakura's
その
head.
人は片倉さんじゃない。
Haru declared.
その山組の方だ。
Oh.
浅井さんにお願いして協力してもらった。
Yuki had no time to be dumbfounded. Nevertheless, her usually talkative mouth refused to move. That's why the Yakuza had hesitated. If Katakura's life were on the line, there would be no reason for these men to restrain themselves. They kept back because the hostages would come of their own.
俺にも家族がいるんだ。勘弁してもらえねえかな、嬢ちゃん。
Yuki's hostage, the man she thought was Katakura, spoke to her in the thickest dialect of the underworld. All Yuki could do was mind
人
his
質には
straight
人質たる理由がいる。そうだろう、ユキ。
By the way, I took a step forward. You're Asami didn't order the director to attack you. The director keeps a taser on him at all times. Sure, Tori told me about it when we had dinner together the day before yesterday. The guy's pretty shady all around, if you ask me. I had interpreted Tokida's sarcasm earlier to mean that the director launched a surprise attack against her. That was an unbelievably stupid move.
さあユキ、その人を離すんだ。頭のいいお前ならわかるだろ。その人を殺しても何の意味もないんだ。
It was quite a dirty trick for Usami. Its outcome depended on Tokida's mental state. If we were less than careful, or even just unlucky, our stand-in might have been killed. He might be unrelated to Tokida's revenge, but he's still a hostage. As Usami said, there's no guarantee that Tokida will surrender now.
もし私が無関係な人を殺すことも厭わなかったらどうするの？
Tokida knew as well as I did that Usami believed in him.
ユキにそんな真似はできない。
Usami declared that belief with conviction, and Tokida flinched and looked away in response.
このままこの人を人質に逃げ出したらどうするの？
This time I responded. How exactly do you intend to do that? Are you planning on driving out of here? There's no way a piddly little nail could keep one of our men docked, let alone while the person holding it is watching the road.
そう。どう考えても不安でいる。
I could tell Tokida's grip on the man had loosened a bit.
私のだけ疑ってごめんね。はい。
Bruh. Oh, that was cool. That was so tense. I got freaked out so much. Crazy. Bye.